open approach. You're looking for your own outcome.
So yeah, speaking of diets, what about the beer diet? What about the green beer diet
Yeah.
specifically? Do you mind if I
Yeah.
rattle off about St. Patrick's Day a little bit?
Yeah. Let's talk. Yeah. Let's get back on track. What do you got for me?
So St. Patrick was thought to be a Roman citizen who was in Britain and enslaved and brought to Ireland around the 5th century. He was either escaped or released, is what it is thought.
Hmm.
And then he returned to Ireland as a priest of Christianity and converted the Druids. And we're not, for the people who are fantasy and Dungeons and Dragonsy type of people, we're not talking about a bear. We're not talking about somebody that can shapeshift here. The Druids were actually more closer to pagans. I
Right.
mean, I don't really have any other way to describe them. I'm not very familiar with their practices. I know that they were just like in many places, like in Ireland or in Britain
Hmm.
and some places in mainland Europe, they were like a, spiritual kind of like shamanistic style religion,
Yeah.
but they didn't worship Christianity. And of course, they couldn't have that. So we have people out there converting people. It's
Right.
not to say it's a bad thing. Thankfully, they did it with pen and paper this time. Um, but supposedly that's what who he was, and March 17th being the day that we celebrate St. Patrick's Day, or otherwise as it's known as feast day honoring St. Patrick, as established by the Catholic Church in 1631.
Mhm.
Um, it is believed to be the day that he died, so that's why we celebrate it.
Ah.
Um, he was also famous for teaching, like as a priest. Obviously, he's a Christian doctrine teaching the Holy Trinity.
Mhm.
Um, there's lots of people that have written about him since 1631. Uh, the color green that was used on the flags in the Irish Rebellion of 1641 supposedly is linked to the color of the shamrock,
Right.
which is the symbol of this parade day thing here.
Hmm.
And speaking of which, the first St. Patrick's Day parade was held in the United States. Apparently, I didn't know this.
That is
Um,
interesting.
it said that the first recorded parade on the Catholic feast day of St. Patrick was held on March 17th, 1601, in a Spanish colony in modern day St. Augustine, Florida. And
Wow.
then they had another one in New York City in 1762, all of which right before the United States became a nation, which is pretty
Hmm.
interesting. So that shows the history of Irish immigration, not just during the potato famine, but long before that. Well, they had famines a lot back then. I think I think they had problems farming for a while. Someone can correct me on that. But the joke was that there was a famine every 6 years in Britain. So,
Oh no, bro.
well, not a joke to the people that starved, obviously, but
Right. Those guys are probably a little upset.
Um, and if you ever watch any television programming on St. Patrick's Day, you
Mhm.
might be seeing the Chicago River being dyed green. It looks like that was started in 1955. The inspiration came when a business major for the Chicago Journeyman Plumbers Union in the area
Mhm.
noticed a white overall stained with bright green, and I guess noticed this for some reason was what he was really spurred on to.
Yeah.
I guess he's like, oh, green and white, we gotta get going here. I don't know. That's kind of an interesting one. But yeah, so they've been doing that since 1955. It takes about 40 pounds of dye to get the apparently environmentally friendly dye. Don't know how that works, but
Right. Yeah, that was something I was kind of curious about. I was like, do we have an environmental impact report on
well,
whatever we're
yeah,
throwing into the water?
yeah, that's interesting to know. I guess fluorescent is a synthetic compound that will
Mhm.
turn orange to red or green when mixed with certain sunlight and water,
Yeah.
which is interesting. But I don't, that's what they say that it's safe. Who knows? And then finally, the one that really I like is because I like corned beef and cabbages. Corned beef and cabbage is actually Irish American invention. It's not originally specifically an Irish thing.
Mhm.
It's a combination of the two cultures. They would cure beef using corn-sized crystals of salt, and they would use peppercorn on the beef as well. And
Mhm.
that was paired with the cabbage, which was one of the cheapest available vegetables
Right.
of the previous eras. So while people in the United States may not be they may not see it as like a themed food for St. Patrick's Day. It's mostly just an American thing, ironically.
Hmm. Interesting. I hope we
Yeah.
get I hope we get some feedback on from like friends and stuff on like how many people actually do something other than like just drink for St. Patrick's Day. Because I'd be interested to see because I'm sure there are um, like some places like throughout the country where it's more of like a cultural thing, kind of like what you're talking about, where they do take it as like you know they are of Irish descent, and so they practice it like it's a cultural thing for them. Um, but as we know in the United States, there's also like everybody celebrates St. Patrick's Day. Everybody celebrates Cinco de Mayo, right? But they really just like they go out, they party, they get fucked up. So I'd be kind of curious.
Well, one of the most common things associated with St. Patrick's Day is discussing ancestry. So you
Hmm,
get together with your
that's true.
family and you discuss your family tree and you trace back and talk about all the different characters and people that have existed from your lineage.
Yeah.
That seems to be a pretty common thing, and that pretty much that lines up because Irish people are very much like that. You know, I've read even stories about moonshiners that were Irish American immigrants as late as like the 1900s, like the very turn of the century,
Mm-hmm.
and they were very much about that. Like, oh, you killed my uncle like 6 years ago with a rifle, so I'm gonna like post up out here and. Well, the only reason we're really shooting at each other is because we're doing illegal shit and moonshining anyway. But I'm going to fucking kill you.
Well,
It's
that's
a really interesting history.
what was the. I feel like there was a Shakespeare. There's some sort of Shakespeare play or something like that where it's like the two rivaling families, right?
Are you
And
talking
that's
about Romeo and Juliet?
is it could be. I actually don't fucking know. I feel like
The
there's a lot.
Capulets and the Montagues?
Yeah, maybe right, and they
Yeah.
hate each other, and so they're killing each other. Um.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like an on-site deal in the streets.
Hmm.
That's why
Hmm.
Tybalt kills. Oh my gosh, I can't remember his name anymore. But yeah, no,
But
that's
and
yeah,
it's like it ends up going so far beyond the feud where it's like this literal just like age old blood feud. But it's like I just wonder like couldn't we have just left it at them like just off those two people, everybody moves on, and then maybe Romeo and Juliet don't die a horrible death.
maybe.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
could be wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Also on the topic of ancestry, I'm obligated to make this joke, but isn't that an awkward thing, for people in the South, like Alabama or something, where the lineage just goes straight up? It's so strange. It doesn't actually branch out to multiple people. It just goes straight up. And okay, I got that out of my system. Um, I can't.
Well, there's a lot of. I mean, the circumstances of the world have been very abnormal compared to what we understand today, man.
Mm,
We live in a pretty anomalous time where everybody is pretty much peaceful and you don't have to worry about a lot of things. Family trees got really screwed up by a lot of warfare
yeah.
and unfortunate pillaging and etc. I'm sure you can imagine the word I'm thinking of here. But yeah, no, the Spaniards in Mexico,
Hmm.
obviously the United States and westward expansion, manifest destiny. God knows what happened there. But there's been so many times throughout history where that shit has rocked people's family trees, and I think that's why the some cultures really, really have that as a big pillar because they're like, no, man, if you don't try to remember, you're not gonna get to because there's all this crazy shit that happens that your family lineage could get wiped out by a famine or who the hell knows, you know? So
No, I actually think that's super interesting, and Lucero has actually done like the 23andMe, like tracing our ancestry, and it's actually super cool. And I think it's something that I would recommend to most because you actually there's like public record and stuff like that, obviously. So we can actually go back and see like my great grandfather's draft card for World War II. We can see his his father's draft card for World War I and World War II. Um, it actually just like it's crazy. It's crazy how much you're gonna find on there. Um, and it's really interesting because obviously like we knew we were lucky enough to know like my great grandfather. Um, but you know, past there's always kind of a stopping point for people, right? Like either you didn't know your grandparents or your great grandparents or something like that. But there's always that stopping point, right? So this kind of gives you an opportunity to kind of look past that veil, and it's something I think is super interesting just to again kind of see like we our family is like based out of like Tennessee or something like that. They resided in Tennessee for like generations. And you have to go really far on that side of the family. You have to go really far um, to like wherever we immigrated, like whenever we immigrated on that side of the family, it is real far back. Like from that point, we were in Tennessee for like a couple like centuries at that point.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Um,
yeah. No, my family history. I'm fortunate enough that my grandmother and grandfather know a good bit about their history.
yeah.
My grandmother actually went through the effort to contact Daughters of the American Revolution
Hmm.
because they helped her trace back her lineage all the way back to a pair of brothers that were conscripted into the British Navy during the American Revolution.
Oh shit.
And when they got over here, they were like, "Fuck this! We hate these motherfuckers," and they were like, "Ew." So they hung out in Pennsylvania for 50 some odd years.
Hmm.
Eventually, made their way to Kansas, and they were moonshiners. Most Irish people that immigrated were.
Right.
It was just kind of the thing you did, and it wasn't illegal. It just plainly wasn't.
Hmm.
The transmission of it and sale of it without the tax of the state was what made it illegal.
Right.
So they were like, no, I made this. I'm fucking selling it. Screw you. Get out of here. You know. But yeah, there are lots of interesting stories that were cataloged by my great grandmother who grew up. Uh, oh man, I think she was 18 or 19 by the time the Second World War started.
Oh wow.
So she grew up during the Depression
Yeah.
and was in the Dust Bowl in Kansas.
Hmm.
Has a lot of anecdotal stories that she wrote down in a booklet. And my grandmother and my aunts helped translate, like clarify details and stuff, make sure we
Yeah.
understood what she was saying.
No shit.
Um, so yeah, I encourage people if you haven't, 23andMe is kind of trivial in some cases. People
Hmm.
get a lot out of it, some people don't.
Yeah.
But regardless of spending money on that, I encourage you to try and trace it yourself if you can help it. Go to like any there's people that specialize in that, tracing lineages.
Yeah.
They'll go back, find the family name, find the marriage certificates, find everything. And they're usually pretty cool people that way. So
Yeah. It's just so crazy. I don't think people ever and don't get me wrong, like I don't think take it with a grain of salt, but it is interesting, right? To know for me at least, I'm somebody who like I'm really about like kind of the process and how things come to be and where things go from that. And so for me, it's really interesting to think about, you know, when I'm tracing back the lineage and stuff like that, the thing that's on my mind is like, wow, all of these things had to happen in order for me to be right here, right now. You know what I mean? Tracing this back, but then also just like living my life. Um,
yeah, think about it briefly.
hmm
Yeah, because it's important.
it's humbling. It's humbling, really, is what it is, because it's like, wow, think about the long list of fucking people up until me. You know what I mean? On both sides, on my mom and my dad's, um, because neither of them. So from like my great grandfather was the one who moved out here to the West Coast, right, and then obviously the other side same thing. So like I'm like the only the second generation to grow up right here on the West Coast, right? Everybody else is, you know, far fucking away. And so it's crazy to think about everything that went into, you know, me getting here. Absolutely absurd, man. It blows my fucking mind. But above all, it's just really humbling to think like, wow, how many things just to get really weird on the butterfly effect? Like how many things you have to change before like you just don't exist?
Yeah, and I think you know there's something to be said about the lifestyle that a lot of people choose nowadays, where they
Mm,
don't want to have kids, but you should really double, triple, quadruple think that, because some people think that the world's filled with shitty people, and it's
mm.
like, what better way to make sure that there are fewer of them than to put one in the world yourself that you can make sure isn't, you know?
Yeah, well,
But
I think it's really complex. I think it's right because we say that, but then we can also think of some people who where it's like, well, maybe you should wait on having kids or something like that. You know what I mean? It's complex.
well, yeah,
Is
you shouldn't just do it
past
willy
that.
nilly. But I'm just saying, like, there is a very definite like purpose, and
Yeah,
it's not only something that most of us have natural programming for, but it's just people, please consider.
yeah. I think like with everything else we talked about, like you should put a lot of thought into it. Um, coming from somebody who has a child. Um,
And someone who doesn't. So
yeah,
take that for what
exactly.
you will too.
But I think it's something that's like it's complex. You know what I mean? I think you really need to evaluate kind of what we were just talking about, like evaluate what got you here and then evaluate like who you really want to be like as a person, you know what I mean? Because maybe and not to hopefully this doesn't sound as shitty as I think it will, but like you need to evaluate who you want to be because that may not be conducive to raising children. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
not and I'm not speaking to you obviously, but to the crowd. Um because if you are somebody who is really driven and you really want to do things that are going to require a lot of your time and energy and efforts, right, like a very successful career or something like that, um, you know you only have so much time and energy. So if you are going to be putting 90+% of that into this really big shot career or something like that, or you want to be a fucking billionaire or something like that, um, just understand that there are going to be other cups in your life that aren't getting filled. And like, yes, it's great that you have $1 billion and you pass that on to your kids. Um, but I, in personal experience, have found that um, kids are much better served with not $1 billion and other things that parents give them, at least in my experience. So it's like I don't want to sound like I'm pushing one way or the other, but I think to wrap it up, like it's just a very complex decision. I think you need to have more than anything self-awareness about yourself and
Yeah.
who it is, understand who you are right now, understand who you want to be, because again, like who you want to be may not be conducive to the partner, the lifestyle of having a partner and having dependents and things like that. You know what I mean? If you feel like you are somebody who wants to value your relationships and things like that, then I think that's more conducive to having children, right? If you value kind of the relationships and you want to enrich them and things like that, and you really want to work on kind of a support system, well, then that has a lot of value in, and having a kid brings a lot of value to that. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I think it's infinitely more complex than I could even make it out to be. And I've put a lot of thought, a lot of time into it. Even before I had my daughter, I put hours and hours and hours. Um, because I was somebody who I was kind of on the fence about the idea. And then I came around eventually, and then I had my daughter, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But again, I wasn't always sure that I was somebody who could really um, do that role justice because it's a big responsibility. Being a mother, being a father, absolutely huge responsibility.
Yep.
And I think to your point, I think we do need more people willing to step into that role just wholeheartedly. Um, but I also recognize it's not something I can't explain to you. You know what I mean? Like I can explain to you my experience, but I can't explain to you like what well, it's not like you're going out for a job and they list off like well, you should probably have these qualifications, and this is what you're going to be doing, on a day-to-day basis. Like, I can't do that for you. um, like, on being a parent, I can't make that out for you because it's so individual. I can tell you it's going to be fucking hard. That's about all I can sum up for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's fucking
Yeah.
it's tricky.
Yeah. Well
Um,
said. Well said. Is there anything
I
else we want to say about St. Patrick's Day?
no, I think that was a nice little history lesson there. Um, I think that was cool. I think glad to know that I have been wrong about St. Patrick's Day for God knows how long. It's actually today, not yesterday, the 17th of March, not the 16th. So feel free. And it's funny because I'm looking at my planner right now, um, and it very clearly states that today is St. Patrick's Day. But for some reason, still fucking wrong. I still paid no attention to it. Um, but we talked a little bit, uh, and I told you I wanted to bring up just to add to the random shit that we've talked to today. Um, actually, I've never asked you before, but what are your thoughts on snakes?
So I don't particularly have a problem with them. I treat them like cats, honestly.
Oh, okay. So
Uh,
you wouldn't be opposed to like having like not that you would go out and seek one as a pet, but it's not something that you would avoid. You're not deathly fucking scared of them or anything like
I'm
that.
not deathly afraid of them. I just understand their capabilities. They're very quick little things.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah,
don't have legs. They literally muscle themselves through shit like
yeah.
anything. Yeah. So like, depending on what kind of snake it is, right? If it's a garden snake, it's probably not venomous. If it bites you, it's
Mm,
probably just pissed off at you. It's gonna hurt. Well, don't
right,
piss it off.
right.
But yeah, no snakes. My grandmother, on the other hand, my grandmother is deathly afraid of snakes.
Oh
Hates
no
them.
shit.
She'll watch. You remember that the third Indiana Jones film where he gets stuck in the train car with all
Yes.
the snakes? She
Oh
was
yeah.
like, I couldn't watch that scene. That's how deathly afraid of snakes she is.
Yeah.
Me, on the other hand, no, I think they're cool.
So I'm guessing she didn't go watch the Anaconda movies in theaters.
Probably not.
I'm guessing that wasn't something she wanted to spend her time doing. That's funny. So a couple of things actually. I'm not like overly enthusiastic about them. I think they're interesting. Um, and I've done a lot of like content consumption around like Amazon conservationism and stuff like that. Um, and so I've heard about them a lot more. Like the anacondas, obviously out in the Amazon. Um, and just recently, I actually just saw a headline that they recorded the largest anaconda like ever. They discovered one and recorded its measurements. It was like 20, I think 26 feet, over 400 pounds. A large beast of an animal. Um, but it's even more interesting because I think something that people don't understand is that that is not the biggest snake in the world. Okay, what they're saying is this is the largest snake that we've been able to find, capture, and then measure. That's a very important distinction because there's some animal where it's easy for us to get this data on domesticated animals, right, and things like that. It's very easy to find and then report data on this. It's much more difficult to do that on wild fucking animals out in the Amazon rainforest, right?
There's a Greenland shark that they documented within the last decade, as far as I remember, that was like 390 something years old. Like, not
I think
even
I saw
joking.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
literally just this ancient fucking beast,
He's
and
just
it looks,
chilling. Yeah.
yeah, and it's crazy. I feel like I saw a headline for one that was even older than that, like but literally like hundreds of years old, and it's something that I think I told Lucera about it, and they were flabbergasted. They were like, "What the fuck?" Um, but
Tortoises also live very long.
yes, I know. I keep trying to convince Deanna to get a tortoise because yeah, they just like very casually they live like over 100 years old, and they also like they just continue to grow. Like you see, obviously at like the zoo or something, if you ever actually leave your house. Um, but you'll see like literally like 400-pound fucking tortoises. Like these things are approaching the size of like a small Prius. Um, and yeah, they just chill. They're pretty like low maintenance, and um, I feel like Lucero has friends with like a tortoise or something that they've told me about. But those are super interesting. I would actually want a tortoise, um, because he would just be chill, and I'm really into animals that like could just outlive their owner. I think that's really cool. I
Yeah,
think that's one of the things that like uh, I don't want to say I hate about dogs, but it's the saddest part of having a dog, right? Is just that like their lifespan is just like so small compared to a human's. Um, but on the topic of snakes, um, two things I wanted to touch on was I just read an article that interviewed a Dr. Daniel Natouche, who is a co-author, and I am probably going to fuck this up, either herpetologist or herpetologist, I don't know, um, at a university in Australia. They were doing a study on the environmental impact and stuff of python farming. So a team of scientists from 4 different countries um, raised over 4,000 pythons across 2 different farms in Thailand and Vietnam. Um, and they were pretty much trying to see, like, okay, what kind of environmental impact, like as far as like greenhouse gases, um, is this going to like produce, right? Because that's obviously a thing in like on the all the industrial farming and stuff that we do right now. In some, there's a lot of like greenhouse emission, right? Um, and then the whether or not it could be like a viable, I don't want to say replacement, but a viable option like long term. And so, a couple of interesting things is that it has lower greenhouse gas emission, like these python farms, because they're reptiles, right? They shit and fart and piss apparently less than mammals, which, if you've ever had a snake, kind of makes sense. Because, like mammals, like dogs, your dog will shit like 5, 6, 7 times a day, right? A snake doesn't do that. I had a snake growing up, so and they also are a lot lower maintenance. So like if you've ever had a pet snake, like you can feed it like once a week. It can even go periods of time like without eating, right? And that's just a kind of evolutionary, right? Like they don't eat every day out in the jungle, right? So that's just kind of like an evolutionary thing that they've adapted to. Um, But obviously, in this environment, they were feeding them uh, kind of just every day because they're trying to get them to grow, right? And so by feeding them every day, they grow pretty rapidly. Um, I will say, however, the finding was that they reached slaughter weight, a slaughter weight, whatever the fuck weight that was for them. They didn't. I don't think they clarified in the article.
it's got to be something like worth for either skin or meat.
Yeah,
The amount of time investment versus how much is returned.
right.
Yeah, it must be.
That makes sense. Um, but it said pretty close to a year, which kind of seems like a long time. Maybe maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's not as long of a time because you have to think like they raised almost 5,000 pythons in that amount of time, right? So I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't be able to raise that many cattle or chicken or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but I will say a year is kind of a long time. Um, but that is also a lot of pythons, and
I
they were.
talked to a cattle farmer once, and he said it's usually 16 to 22 months.
Oh,
Just
really?
depends. For
That makes
cattle,
sense.
like
Like
general
cattle.
cattle, we're not talking about a
Yeah,
specific type of cow, but
yeah, and that kind of makes sense because they grow to be bigger animals. You know what I mean?
yeah, like
Versus like
1,200 pounds.
when I'm thinking of like chickens, they probably do that pretty easily because um the period of growth, I feel like chickens grow pretty rapidly. I could be wrong. I've never been a fucking farmer. Um, but I feel like as far as like chickens, they probably pump those out pretty quick.
They also pump the chickens. It depends. I mean, if you're talking about like Tyson chicken, they kind of pump those chickens full of hormones so that they grow to
That's
be
true.
much larger than they would ever naturally be able to attain. It's almost like they're, putting them on gear.
Juiced. Yeah.
Juiced ass chickens.
Um, but yeah, it was super interesting, and they so they found it to be very sustainable. There are also different countries that like outsource the like raising of the pythons. So you would essentially go in other countries, just to be clear. This is not a U.S. program, but in other countries, you'll essentially go um, you'll like buy a small python, right? And then you raise it around your house. It eats the vermin and shit like that around your house. And then after a period of time, you turn it in and they pay you for it. So really interesting some of the research that's being done about around this, um, and some of the different uh, things. Obviously, this isn't something that's at all common in the U.S., but in other countries they already eat snake meat and shit like that. It's
Yeah, I imagine
it's
Americans are much more afraid of snake than the Vietnamese or people who
yeah,
actually have to deal with snakes most of their life are much more comfortable with them, and that kind of lines up with using them as vermin exterminators.
yeah,
Like I was saying, treat them kind of like cats or something.
yeah, literally. You know what I
That's pretty
mean?
cool.
And
I mean, I've
like,
never had snake. I've never eaten a snake. I've never actually. I can't even think of a time I've ever touched snake skin. I mean,
really?
my buddy had a snake growing up, but like I never had any. I've never known anybody that had any snake skin clothes or anything. I
Hmm.
think maybe that's a thing of the past. I have no idea what fashion is like. I'm practically a fucking prehistoric troglodyte as far as any of that's concerned.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be willing to give it a try. I mean, they say squirrel doesn't taste half bad. There's all sorts of stuff I haven't eaten out
Squirrel,
there, so
bro.
might as well give it a shot.
Okay, first of all, I need to see whoever told you squirrel doesn't taste half bad. Um, because I'm imagining somebody in overalls with the straw hat and they're smoking out of a wooden pipe.
Well, minus sans the wooden pipe and sans the straw hat, but it was an 89-year-old woman who grew up as a sharecropper in Mississippi in the
Right.
Delta in the 40s.
Right.
I mean, that's what was out there, so
Yeah.
they ate it.
Hey, man. I
My grandmother and grandfather ate squirrel out in Kansas in the
no
50s
shit.
and
That's
60s. Yeah,
insane.
they just eat all sorts of shit, man.
I fucking believe it. I fucking believe it, honestly.
But
But
yeah,
it's
snakes.
so weird that like today I feel like it's you know you see some of the things that like other people in like other cultures and countries and stuff like that eat, and in here in the States I feel like it's very the normalized list is pretty short. This could just be like a me thing. Maybe my bubble is just really small because obviously people do like sushi and like there's a lot of different cuisines and stuff like that. Um, but as far as like when I'm thinking of like the meats and stuff like that, like my girlfriend won't eat anything that's not beef or chicken. You know what I mean? Like I've tried venison, I've tried like bison.
Oh, venison's great.
Venison's pretty good. It's not. I'm not gonna lie. It's not my favorite. I've tried
I mean, it's
elk.
gamey, but I like it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little gamey. It's not bad though. But I like elk. Elk too. Elk's a little gamey if you've ever had elk. Um, but yeah, I definitely like my bison. Like bison is my favorite. If we ever start like hunting or something like that, um, we got to figure out where we could get some bison
Yeah,
because
that's unfortunate because you're about, let's see, it's 2024. So let's see, that's like only 150 years too late for that.
really. So what do
Well,
you?
so I take that back. There's probably people who still farm bison, but as far as free range available natural bison
Yeah.
that are not protected, I have no clue if that's even a thing anymore, dude.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow, that would make me very sad. How am I supposed to? Oh, damn. I guess I'm stuck
There
with
are
like
only a few
some
states
popcorn.
that allow free range bison hunting in the United States: Utah, Wyoming, Arizona, Alaska, and Montana. And you
Oh,
have to get, like every other kill, you have to get tags for
tags,
it and
yeah.
permits.
Hmm.
So good luck. But yeah, it's very, very rare.
Hey,
Also,
some of those aren't too far away. You said Wyoming, Utah, Arizona.
Arizona, Alaska.
I did sure as fuck not going to Alaska. Not
Too
to
cold?
hunt.
Too cold?
Not to hunt, bro. Bro, are you kidding me? Like to
That would be the
fly,
hardest shit of all time, in my opinion. That would go so hard, man.
that would
Oh,
be
man.
tough as a motherfucker.
Oh, of course it would be. But
Like,
you keep your internal temperature raised by, injecting small amounts of alcohol by volume into your bloodstream. So just kidding.
that's
We don't encourage that hunters drink and hunt at the same time. Please do not get that confused.
yeah. Honestly, we're not about infusions at this podcast either. It's all about the suppository, okay? Just shove it up your ass, and that'll keep you nice and warm.
Butt chug, butt chug. Jesus Christ. All right.
um, but yeah, I thought I saw that. I read through like the entire article and took notes because I thought that was super interesting. I wouldn't be opposed to trying like snake. They reportedly it tastes just like chicken, but again, I want to see the motherfuckers that are reporting this.
That's what they say about bugs from time to time when they talk
Really?
about trying to get people to eat bug burgers or whatever. Insect meat or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh well, it's high in protein, but it's not. The thing is there's lots of different proteins. I don't know if people know this,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of different ones, and not
Hmm.
every meat or bug apparently has the same types of proteins, and therefore
Right.
isn't an exact substitute. And you'd have to eat something different to substitute the ones you're missing anyway. But
Right.
silly stuff, yeah.
That's interesting. So Python burgers, bug burgers. I never heard of bug burgers either. Um, and I kind of wish I hadn't. Uh, but that's all pretty interesting stuff. And I think I don't know if you're aware of this, but one of the things that came to my mind when I was reading this was the Florida Everglades. Are you aware of the Burmese python issue that they have out there?
Oh, they have invasive snakes out there that
Mhm.
need culling.
Yeah, they
So what?
can't.
So what do you do for that? Do you release like alligators to eat the snakes or something?
Probably not because then like they just don't, right? Like the alligators aren't just gonna eat the snakes. They just start eating the easier shit to catch,
The
right?
people.
And so now you have the Florida Everglades infested with alligators and Burmese pythons.
I know the solution, guys. We need to import elephants. They'll stomp the alligators out of the Everglades.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah, we're just gonna keep
Eventually, it's just a fucking zoo. You got
it's a
like the
jungle.
fucking Burmese tigers and all sorts of crazy shit that shouldn't be there. Yeah, no, that sounds like a funny skit.
But literally,
Uh,
it I think it came from just like people owning them. Um,
yeah, that's
and
right.
as sometimes people are irresponsible, right? Either they get out or it's too much work, so they fucking throw them out in a field. Um, but yeah, I want to say it's such that they can't control the population anymore. And so that was one of the things that came to my mind was like, what if some people are going to lose their shit for this, but what if they have some sort of system where like you know what I mean, turn this in to like some sort of python farm, right? And they harvest it for the meat, right?
Or skin or whatever's valuable
Yeah.
out of it. I mean, you could probably, if you have venomous snakes that you farm, not that that would be the preferred snake to farm,
Well,
but
they currently,
sell anti venom.
yeah, that was one of the places they got the research from was because we have snake farms where they harvest the venom, right? Like that's where we get the antivenoms and things like that, right? Is their snake farms, existing snake farms. This is the first time they're trying it to harvest the meat, you know what I mean? But we that's already something that we do, you know what I mean? Um, but for harvesting the meat, that's one of the things that struck for me was like, oh wow, I wonder, about the Everglades where they have a huge fucking steak problem. Maybe this is something they could actually use and apply. Um,
Yeah, or I mean, something as simple as turning in, like, if you can't turn it into a farming situation, turn it into a culling situation.
hmm
Historically, if there's invasive species in Texas, I read about this a couple years ago.
hmm
There's services where they offer, because wild hogs,
Yeah.
are such a bad problem out there. They offer, like, hey, you want to pay us for an hour of time? We'll fly you out on a helicopter
Literally.
so you can help cull the invasive species. Now,
Yeah.
some people think that that's inhumane, this, that, the other thing, but wild boars do not give a fuck about you, and they will use their giant tusks and gore you and kill you if they so choose. So, who's really the bad guy here?
Well,
And also, I
that's
get bacon, so
that's something that people don't understand about some of these like invasive species. And as soon as we start talking about hunting or killing animals, we're gonna get backlash. But people don't understand that like some of these species, like you cannot leave them unchecked. You know what I mean? Like there's not enough things to manage the population, right? And so what happens? Well, if nothing is managing that population, it's similar to humans, right? Like nothing manages our population. So what happens? Like, well, the ecological impact is massive, right? And we
yeah, and
like
we're not
we as a
just
species continue to grow. Well, when you have that out in the wild, it's a similar effect, right? Like these fucking pythons, they can no longer control the population. They're just out. They're just fucking out there. They're just now fucking controlling the Everglades essentially in Texas. These hogs, and I've heard about that too. It's very common, and I hear about it a lot, and I think it's still an ongoing issue. Um, and where like other places you normally need like tag and stuff and these permits to go hunting. Um, in Texas, not for the hogs. Like you
yeah.
just go out and you can gun these things down, and it's because the population is just out of control, man.
And we're not just talking about the impact they have environmentally on other species that exist in the ecosystem. We're also talking about the damage that they cause to crops, the
Yep.
damage that they cause to livestock and other valuable assets that
hmm
people have, that otherwise, without these individual species existing in this area, it wouldn't be a problem. So that's why they need to be dealt with. You can't just
Yeah.
allow them to continue to ruin economy for humans, because somebody wants to just let the piggies, do whatever the piggies do. That's
Yeah.
that's not really an option in this in this day and age. Not, at least at this point. There's millions of the fucking things.
Yeah. And it's fun fact. It's actually becoming an issue with wolves too, because they reintroduced wolves. I think to I want to say like Colorado or something like that, and then they just reintroduced them into like the Idaho or Wyoming regions, one of the two. Yeah, feel free to fact check me. Um, but they reintroduced them, and what happens is, well, nothing is killing the wolves, but the wolves will kill everything. And so you will see the wolf populations continue to just linearly grow, but then elk populations start to plummet. Well, gee, I wonder why that is. It's because the wolves kill all the
Yeah.
fucking elk, but nothing is there to kill the
Yeah,
wolves.
so if they have an issue with too many deer, elk, bucks, whatever you
hmm
want, whatever it is, and they have a predator that they can introduce, yeah, that is an option. Originally, though, so for the instance in which Colorado, they were eradicated, they were hunted
The
like to
wolves,
death in Colorado 80 years ago.
the
So
wolves
this
were
is the wolves were, yeah.
okay.
So they just dropped 5 gray wolves in Colorado, so it's going to take a while.
And when was
But
that?
that was at the end of last year.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
And they want to reintroduce the predators to help restore biodiversity, like talking about with too many bucks or whatever. They eat specific types of plants. They eat too much of them because there are too many of them.
hmm
That's why we're reintroducing a predator into an ecosystem it was previously thriving in, because there were too many of them. And 80 years ago, Colorado was a little bit more rural, as you can imagine,
Yeah,
and that was probably a significant issue. You don't want your children to be eaten by wolves. You don't
yeah.
want your anything to get attacked by wolves,
But
and there were
that's
tons of them. So.
that's one thing. Not to go down the like too deep of a rabbit hole here though, but that's one thing that people don't understand about hunting is that hunting is used to try to maintain that ecological balance, right? Because again, the elk populations, one of the things that manages that is hunting in that state. You know what I mean? Um, and so one of the problems with just reintroducing with the wolves again, if we hunted them out to extinction, yeah, like okay, I understand like bring them back to the terrain and stuff like that. And also like probably put something in place to where we don't run them out of that area again. Um, but again, it's this very intricate balancing act to where we can't let anyone kind of get too far out. We need to manage all the populations. We need to manage the elk. We need to manage the wolves now. Um, because if it wasn't Colorado, it must have been somewhere else. But there is for sure somewhere in kind of one of those upper states to where the wolves just start to devastate the elk populations because there's nothing hunting the wolves. You know what I mean? And there is normally I want to say there's pretty heavy regulation on like some of the predator hunting. I think it's seen as like trophy hunting or something like that. And so it's heavily regulated if it's allowed at all. Um, but it's something that's really tough because if we can hunt the prey, but then we can't hunt the predators. Nothing is killing the predators. You know what I mean? The mountain
Hmm.
lions, the wolves, the stuff like that. Like nothing. If we don't take them out, nothing does. You know what I mean? There's nothing out there aside from another mountain lion that's gonna kill a fucking mountain lion.
It's probably good that they start so small with numbers like five in that case. Then,
Hmm.
you know, because otherwise things like elk, they do die if it gets too cold, but they
Hmm.
won't kill all of them. Which
Yeah.
is good. You don't want everything to die. And the wolves won't eat the corpse entirely sometimes, which other scavengers benefit greatly from that
Yeah.
in the ecosystem, where they don't have the ability to take down something so high in protein and value for them to survive.
Hmm.
They can scavenge off of leftovers from the wolves. So it's a big biodiverse circle going on there.
Circle of life, buddy. Circle of
Yes,
life.
sir. So how you feeling? How we doing here on it's 3:30, 3:20, 3:20.
Yeah, we could probably start to wrap up here because I'm supposed to help Lucera move. Um,
Are they moving?
but
Oh well,
oh
we'll talk about it afterwards.
yeah. They're actually calling me right now, so I'll stop recording. Don't forget to
All right.
follow. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, all that shit. If I actually end up posting this.